The COVID-19 pandemic has shaken up the rankings of the world's most livable cities. Auckland has rocketed to the top of the Economist Intelligence Unit's annual survey. Now, that's on the back of New Zealand's successful coronavirus response. The Kiwi capital, Wellington, also making the top 10 out of 140 places. Cities in the Asia-Pacific, they've also leapt ahead. Japan has 2 cities, Osaka and Tokyo, in the top 5. Australia has 4, including Adelaide and Perth, in the top 10, all of which had a swift COVID-19 response. Now, in contrast, European cities fared poorly this year. Vienna, which has been the world's most livable city since 2018, crashed out of the top 10 to 12th place. For more, we have Simon Baptist, Global Chief Economist at the Economist Intelligence Unit, to talk to us about the results of this survey. Simon, how did the pandemic change the way that livability is quantified?
The pandemic has a big impact on the EIU's livability rankings this year. It has, over the last 12 months, led to some quite large changes in how cities are ranked. This is a snapshot in time, so we do a survey twice a year and take stock of where livability is at. So, of course, as the pandemic has proceeded, getting better and worse in different countries at different paces, putting pressure on healthcare systems, and also lockdowns coming and going, affecting the availability of sporting, cultural, educational and other services. There have been some very big changes. This time, the 2 big trends was the rise of US and Chinese cities as they emerged from lockdowns, vaccinations in the US proceeding apace, and restrictions opening up there and in China. On the other hand, compared to 6 months ago, as your intro mentioned, European cities have tended to fall down as the restrictions there have tightened up again. The top 10 dominated by Australia, New Zealand, Japan and Switzerland, making up all of the top 10. Countries that have managed to combine relatively low infection, so low pressure on the healthcare system, while staying relatively open, and of course had pre-existing very high levels of livability. They were already all very good places to live before the pandemic.
Yeah, and as you mentioned some of them, but 8 out of the top 10 livable cities are in the Asia-Pacific. Could you just elaborate on some of them perhaps, and what contributed to such positive results for the region?
Sure. I mean, it's not really an Asia-Pacific trend. It's very related to those particular countries. The APAC region also has some of the world's least livable cities, so places like Dhaka in Bangladesh, Karachi in Pakistan, or Port Moresby in Papua New Guinea are in the bottom 10. So Asia has a full range of cities from top to bottom, including where I am, Singapore, is in 34th place in this round of the survey. But Australia, New Zealand and Japan, they all combine high GDP per capita. So countries have a good amount of resources to spend on facilities like healthcare and education. High personal income means there's enough money to support a vibrant sporting, cultural, entertainment and restaurant scene, and they're also characterised by good governance. So governments in all those 3, New Zealand, Australia and Japan, are all very competent policymakers and able to implement effective governance. It helps to be crowded, but not too crowded. Japanese cities are really the exception of being the very large cities that make it high up the index. Most of the other cities in the top 15 or so tend to be small or medium-sized cities in wealthy countries. Once you get too big, you then start to have some negative impacts such as higher crime or congestion or pollution. Now, Japan, of course, notorious for having very low levels of crime despite being large cities. So there's some of the reasons why it's cities from those countries that are doing so well. In terms of the pandemic, they're normally in competition with cities like Vancouver in Canada or Vienna in Austria. But this time, now timing of the survey, March 2021, there were more lockdowns in Canada and much of Europe in that time, more so than in Australia, New Zealand or Japan. And so European cities did see lower availability of bars, restaurants, sporting, cultural, other services during that time, as well as having their healthcare systems under high levels of stress, which negatively impacted their score. I would expect that to change over the following 6 months, of course, as the pandemic progresses. And European cities, I predict, will make a bounce back. Vaccination is proceeding quickly. We just had a story about the opening up of Europe to domestic tourism. I think Europe's continued opening up is going to lead to an increase in its scores in areas such as culture and environment in 6 months' time when we do our next update.
All right, many thanks for speaking to us this evening. Simon Baptist, Global Chief Economist at the Economist Intelligence Unit.